When the stars first went silent, most thought it was a glitch. Telescopes blinked at empty coordinates, their vast mirrors capturing only the void. Radio arrays that once hummed with the static of a breathing universe fell dead quiet. Entire constellations winked out, not from light, but from data. The chatter of distant quasars, the faint hum of background radiation, all gone. Space was no longer a vast, whispering ocean. It was a graveyard. At first, the experts blamed solar flares. The news assured the public it was temporary, an atmospheric disturbance, maybe a burst of radiation from a nearby star. But the silence didn't stop. Night after night, the darkness above seemed to grow deeper. SETI's massive arrays, once a forest of listening ears spread across deserts and mountaintops, now hummed with quiet futility. Researchers worked around the clock, recalibrating, updating software, hunting for a flaw. But there was none. The universe wasn't just quiet, it was actively ignoring us. Then the disappearances began. First, a handful of astronomers, emails bounced back, homes emptied. Then, entire observatories went dark. The Arecibo facility in Puerto Rico, abandoned. Mauna Kea's summit in Hawaii, locked down under military guard. Universities with thriving astrophysics departments suddenly listed entire faculties as on leave. Online forums buzzed with panic. Theories piled up, from solar storms to government cover-ups. But those who claimed they knew the truth posted wild, desperate warnings. Some even posted distorted audio clips, whispers buried in static, voices that didn't sound human. I told myself it was all paranoia, just another internet spiral, until the night everything changed. It was past midnight, and I was scrolling through another thread, people frantically sharing coordinates, claiming they'd detected something. A user named Observer404 posted a frantic message. They're lying. The stars didn't go silent. We did. Earth is jamming them. I didn't have time to respond before my phone buzzed. An emergency alert, but not the usual blaring alarm. This one was silent. A text notification blinked onto my screen. Attention. This is Earth's Galactic Silence Protocol. Effective immediately, any signal detected beyond our world will be treated as hostile. Violation will result in immediate enforcement. The text vanished as quickly as it appeared. I thought it was some sick prank until every device in my apartment went black for a second. My laptop, my phone, even the clock on the wall. When they flickered back, they all displayed the same message. Earth has gone silent. Do not respond. I felt a cold dread settling in. I tried calling a friend. No signal. My internet connection was still active, but every site I visited was a sea of error pages. Except one. The same forum I'd been reading. It was still there, but the threads were freezing, comments disappearing. That's when the knock came at my door. 3 sharp raps. I didn't move, holding my breath. Another knock, insistent. I forced myself forward, peeking through the peephole. Nothing but the dark hallway. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Against all reason, I answered. Don't speak, don't ask questions, just listen, a woman's voice whispered, strained and muffled like she was hiding. The protocol is real. They've sealed Earth. If you hear anything, any signal, any voice, turn it off. Don't respond. Don't even acknowledge it. They're listening, and they know when we listen back. The line cut dead. I tried to call back, but the number didn't exist. My apartment felt too small, the air too thick. I double-checked the locks, pulled the curtains tight. But outside, the city was unchanged. People were still driving. Streetlights blinked on and off. The distant hum of life a hollow reassurance. But the stars, they were gone. Not hidden by clouds, not dimmed by city lights, just gone. I sat in the darkness, gripping my phone, staring at the empty sky. What did she mean? They're listening? Who were they? And why did we have to stay silent? Then I saw it. A faint, sickly glow on my radio even though it was turned off. A slow, pulsing light. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. It was impossible. The power was off. A thin, static-filled whisper crackled through the speakers. "Help! They're listening. Please, do not respond." The light died. Silence returned, thick and smothering. When the stars first went silent, most thought it was a glitch. Telescopes blinked at empty coordinates, their vast mirrors capturing only the void. Radio arrays that once hummed with the static of a breathing universe fell dead quiet. Entire constellations winked out, not from light, but from data. The chatter of distant quasars, the faint hum of background radiation, all gone. Space was no longer a vast, whispering ocean. It was a graveyard. At first, the experts blamed solar flares. The news assured the public it was temporary, an atmospheric disturbance, maybe a burst of radiation from a nearby star. But the silence didn't stop. Night after night, the darkness above seemed to grow deeper. SETI's massive arrays, once a forest of listening ears spread across deserts and mountaintops, now hummed with quiet futility. Researchers worked around the clock, recalibrating, updating software, hunting for a flaw. But there was none. The universe wasn't just quiet, it was actively ignoring us. Then the disappearances began. First, a handful of astronomers, emails bounced back, homes emptied. Then, entire observatories went dark. The Arecibo facility in Puerto Rico, abandoned. Mauna Kea's summit in Hawaii, locked down under military guard. Universities with thriving astrophysics departments suddenly listed entire faculties as on leave. Online forums buzzed with panic. Theories piled up, from solar storms to government cover-ups. But those who claimed they knew the truth posted wild, desperate warnings. Some even posted distorted audio clips, whispers buried in static, voices that didn't sound human. I told myself it was all paranoia, just another internet spiral, until the night everything changed. It was past midnight, and I was scrolling through another thread, people frantically sharing coordinates, claiming they'd detected something. A user named Observer404 posted a frantic message. "They're lying. The stars didn't go silent. We did. Earth is jamming them." I didn't have time to respond before my phone buzzed. An emergency alert, but not the usual blaring alarm. This one was silent. A text notification blinked onto my screen. "Attention. This is Earth's Galactic Silence Protocol. Effective immediately, any signal detected beyond our world will be treated as hostile. Violation will result in immediate enforcement." The text vanished as quickly as it appeared. I thought it was some sick prank until every device in my apartment went black for a second. My laptop, my phone, even the clock on the wall. When they flickered back, they all displayed the same message. "Earth has gone silent. Do not respond." I felt a cold dread settling in. I tried calling a friend. No signal. My internet connection was still active, but every site I visited was a sea of error pages. Except one. The same forum I'd been reading. It was still there, but the threads were freezing, comments disappearing. That's when the knock came at my door. 3 sharp raps. I didn't move, holding my breath. Another knock, insistent. I forced myself forward, peeking through the peephole. Nothing but the dark hallway. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Against all reason, I answered. "Don't speak, don't ask questions. Just listen," a woman's voice whispered, strained and muffled like she was hiding. "The protocol is real. They've sealed Earth. If you hear anything, any signal, any voice, turn it off. Don't respond. Don't even acknowledge it. They're listening, and they know when we listen back." The line cut dead. I tried to call back, but the number didn't exist. My apartment felt too small, the air too thick. I double-checked the locks, pulled the curtains tight. But outside, the city was unchanged. People were still driving. Streetlights blinked on and off. the distant hum of life a hollow reassurance. But the stars, they were gone. Not hidden by clouds, not dimmed by city lights, just gone. I sat in the darkness, gripping my phone, staring at the empty sky. What did she mean? They're listening? Who were they? And why did we have to stay silent? Then I saw it, a faint, sickly glow on my radio even though it was turned off. A slow, pulsing light. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. It was impossible. The power was off. A thin, static-filled whisper crackled through the speakers. Help! They're listening. Please, do not respond. The light died. Silence returned, thick and smothering. A voice cut through, more frantic this time, almost screaming, "Do not speak! Do not acknowledge! They know!" Silence. The radio clicked off. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping, my chest heaving. Was this what the woman warned me about? But who were they? And why did it feel like they were getting closer? That's when the lights in my apartment flickered, once, then again. The darkness seemed to ripple, and the silence. It wasn't empty. I could feel it now, like 1,000 invisible eyes pressing against me, watching. In a desperate panic, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a blanket and crawled into the narrow space beneath my bed. I pulled the covers tight around me as if they could hide me from something I couldn't see. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just stared into the darkness. And from somewhere beyond the walls, faint but unmistakable, I heard the slow, scraping sound of something. Crawling. The darkness beneath my bed was a cocoon of stale air and muffled fear. I forced myself to stay quiet, every breath a measured whisper. My phone was dead, the laptop frozen, but the scraping sound beyond my walls hadn't stopped. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragged across metal. And then a faint rhythmic tapping, something brushing against the door. Tap, tap, tap. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to silence my own heartbeat, but the tapping grew louder, more insistent. I bit down on the edge of the blanket, holding back a cry. I didn't want to look, didn't want to know what was out there, but my eyes betrayed me. They drifted toward the gap beneath the door, a thin sliver of pale light from the hallway. But that light wasn't empty. Shadows moved, sliding across the floor like oil, pooling, twisting. A shape pressed against the door, a dark mass shifting, seeping under the narrow crack. I watched, paralyzed, as a long, thin tendril of shadow slipped through, curling, reaching, feeling. It twisted in the air, sensing, almost tasting. I bit down harder, tears pooling in my eyes. I tried to press myself deeper under the bed, but the thin carpet seemed to press back, trapping me. The radio clicked on again, even though I couldn't see it. Static crackled, a faint voice fighting through the noise. I strained to hear it, my ears catching broken words. Marked, listening. Breach. The shadow paused, freezing in place. The voice grew louder, desperate. If you hear this, don't react, don't respond. Static swallowed the voice, a rising shriek that seemed to burn in my ears. The shadow jerked, twisted, then snapped back under the door like a recoiling snake. And then silence. I stayed under the bed for what felt like hours. My muscles cramped and aching, but I didn't move. Not until the first pale light of dawn crawled through the window, brushing against the walls. With trembling hands, I pushed myself out. My room looked unchanged, but the air felt colder. I checked the door. The thin line of darkness beneath it seemed normal, no trace of the shadow. But when I reached for the handle, my fingers brushed something warm, almost sticky. I yanked my hand back, staring at my palm. A dark, oily smear. It shimmered faintly like liquid shadow. A faint hum came from the radio again, a low, constant pulse. I unplugged it, but it didn't matter. The hum continued, pressing against my thoughts, a constant reminder. I needed to get out. Anywhere was better than here. I grabbed my coat, threw open the door, and rushed down the hallway. The building felt empty, too quiet, every door shut, the stairwell dark. I tried the elevator. It blinked, then stayed dead. Panic clawed at me as I shoved open the emergency exit, taking the stairs two at a time. But when I burst out into the street, I stopped short. The city was a hushed tomb. Cars sat abandoned at odd angles, a few with doors still open. A newspaper stand had tipped over, its scattered pages fluttering but making no sound. The wind was gone. The sky was a pale, sickly gray, the horizon hazed with a thin, shimmering mist. I called out, a desperate, "Hello?" My voice seemed swallowed, muffled, like shouting underwater. No response. Then I saw the first of them. Someone standing at the corner of the street, their back to me, perfectly still. I almost called out, but something about them stopped me. Their head was tilted slightly as if listening. Their arms hung limp at their sides, and the longer I stared, the more I noticed. The faint, dark shimmer rippling across their body. Another figure stood a block away, then another and another, scattered like statues in a twisted garden. All of them facing away, all of them listening. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out, still dead, the screen black. But the buzzing didn't stop. Panic hammered in my chest as I shoved it back, my eyes darting around. One of the figures shifted, a slow, stuttering motion, its head turning slightly toward me. I didn't wait. I ran. My breath came in panicked bursts, my feet slamming against the empty street. Storefronts passed in a blur, windows dark, the eerie silence pressing against me. No cars, no pedestrians, nothing but those standing figures scattered along the sidewalks. Some turned as I ran, their heads twisting with a slow, unnatural motion. A voice broke through the silence, thin and broken. You broke the protocol. You listened. It wasn't coming from behind me. It was inside my head, a whisper clawing against my thoughts. I turned a corner, slamming into an alley, my hands shaking. The whisper grew louder, fragmented words clawing at me. They know. Marked. Escape. No, I screamed, pressing my hands to my ears. But the whisper didn't stop. I looked up, and at the end of the alley another figure stood, facing away but slowly twisting, its head rotating a full, unnatural circle toward me. I stumbled back, tripping, hitting the cold, wet ground. My phone buzzed again, and this time, it lit up. One new message, a text from the unknown number. Stop listening. They see you now. And at that moment, the figure's eyes opened. Two hollow voids, swirling with that same oily darkness. Its mouth stretched open, a thin, rasping noise spilling out. The air seemed to pulse, a faint rhythmic hum pressing against my ears. I knew that sound. It was the same hum from my radio. But now it was everywhere. I stood, forcing my shaking legs to move, stumbling back out into the street. But the figures were all turning now, their faces blank, their eyes wide voids. A thin, oily mist curled from their bodies, reaching toward me. I had to get away. Away from the city, away from the silence that wasn't silence at all. I ran, knowing I couldn't escape but refusing to stop. I ran, but the city stretched around me like a maze of shadows. Streets that should have led to open avenues twisted into dead ends. Buildings leaned in, their windows dark and watching. I tried side roads, alleys, but each path seemed to funnel me deeper, the towering silence pressing against me. And always, they were there, those figures, standing still, scattered like forgotten mannequins. But the more I ran, the more they turned, their heads twisting, their empty eyes following me. That thin, oily mist seeped from their bodies, pooling around their feet, curling in tendrils that clawed at the air. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against my leg. I snatched it out, but the screen was dead. Still, the buzzing continued. A constant, frantic pulse. I shoved it back in my pocket, fighting the urge to scream. It wasn't helping. It was only another reminder of how trapped I was. I turned another corner and saw a flicker of movement. Someone running. Relief surged through me, a wild, desperate hope. "Wait!" I shouted, but they didn't stop. I chased, stumbling over cracked pavement, rounding another corner just in time to see them vanish through a rusted metal door beneath a crumbling overpass. I threw myself at the door, yanking it open, and stumbled inside. Darkness swallowed me, the air thick with a damp, metallic smell. I slammed the door shut, feeling a brief, suffocating relief. But then a flashlight beam snapped on, blinding me. "Who the hell are you?" a voice demanded, sharp, angry, but so human it nearly made me cry. I blinked, the light searing my eyes, and raised a trembling hand. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. The light lowered and I saw her, a woman, maybe 30, with wild, tangled hair and eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Her other hand held a crowbar, stained with something dark. "You shouldn't have followed me," she whispered, stepping back. Her gaze darted past me, her knuckles white around the crowbar. "Did they see you?" Who?" I gasped, leaning against the wall, trying to catch my breath. "The silenced," she whispered, the fear in her voice chilling. "The ones who listened, the ones who broke the protocol." "I didn't," I began, but she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "We all did. We all listened. That's why they're here, why they're hunting us." I wanted to argue, to beg her for an explanation, but something thudded against the door. A slow, scraping sound, then another. Her face went pale and she grabbed me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. "Quiet. Don't breathe. Don't move." We huddled in the shadows and I forced myself to stay silent, though my heart felt like it would explode. Through a narrow gap I saw the door shudder, the handle twitching, turning. A faint, dark mist seeping in around the edges. Her flashlight flickered and she switched it off. In the darkness, I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. "They don't see, not like we do," she whispered, her lips so close to my ear I could feel her breath. "They hear, they sense sound, thought, emotion. They know when we listen, when we respond." The door creaked, then fell silent. The mist pooled, twisted, then seemed to pulse, like a creature tasting the air. I clenched my fists, biting down hard on my lip to stay silent. The woman's hand gripped mine, her fingers cold and shaking. We waited, minutes stretching into an eternity, until the mist finally retracted, oozing back under the door. The scraping sound faded. She didn't relax, not for a second. "They're never gone. They're just searching." "What are they?" I whispered, afraid but desperate to know. "Echoes," she whispered, "remnants of those who tried to listen, who reached out, who broke the protocol. They're not just dead. They're erased, souls stripped, turned into silence itself." "But the protocol? Who started it?" I asked, barely daring to speak. Her eyes met mine, hollow and haunted. "Earth did. We did. It was a warning, a last chance. The universe isn't quiet because it's empty. It's quiet because they're out there, listening. And when we listen back..." A shudder ran through her. "We become part of the silence." My mind raced, fragments of everything that had happened crashing together. The disappearances, the silent city, the eerie figures, people trapped in a limbo between life and nothing. But I still didn't understand. "Then why do they hunt us?" I whispered. "If they're just echoes..." "Because we're still alive," she interrupted, her voice cracking, "and we remember the sound. We break the silence just by existing, by trying to reach out. That's why they hunt, to silence us forever." Something thudded against the door again and we froze. But this time it was a voice, a faint, muffled whisper. Not like the others. This one was human. "Please, please, let me in. I'm not one of them. I swear." The woman's grip tightened. Don't even answer." The voice grew frantic. "Please, I'm trapped out here. They're coming. You have to let me in." My chest tightened. The need to help. The horror of leaving someone to die warring inside me. What if they're telling the truth? That's how it starts, she whispered. The silenced can mimic anything. Voices, memories. They know what we want to hear. But the voice outside kept begging, sobbing now. Please, I don't want to die out here. Please, please. I turned to her, desperate. We can't just... She slapped me, the shock freezing my words. You want to die? You want to become one of them? Because the second you answer, the second you acknowledge them, you're marked. Just like I was. Just like you were when you heard the first whisper. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't told her. I hadn't told her I heard the whisper on the radio. The voice outside stopped. Silence pressed in. The woman's eyes were wide, her breath coming faster. It knows we're here. Something slammed against the door. A dull, wet thud. Again and again, each strike growing louder. I backed away, my heart racing, and she pulled me further into the darkness. But even as the door shook, even as the walls trembled, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already found me. That I wasn't hiding. I was being hunted. The pounding against the door grew louder, each slam a hammer against my sanity. I backed away, but the woman yanked me further into the darkness. We stumbled through a narrow hallway lined with rusted pipes, the air thick with damp, metallic rot. Her flashlight flickered, but she shut it off again, leaving us in darkness. This way, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant, rhythmic pounding. I followed, my pulse racing, my mind clawing at 1,000 questions, but terror kept me silent. We reached a ladder. She climbed first, vanishing into the gloom above, and I followed, my trembling hands struggling for grip. The rungs were slick, cold. I forced myself upward, the darkness pressing against me like a weight. The pounding below was still there, growing desperate, wet, a sound like flesh slamming against metal. We emerged into a narrow room, a forgotten maintenance corridor. She slammed the hatch shut, twisting a rusted handle until it screeched. For a moment, there was only darkness, our ragged breathing the only sound. Then she clicked on her flashlight again, sweeping the beam around the room. Exposed pipes lined the walls, most dripping with a thin, dark liquid. The air was damp, cold, and smelled faintly of something sweet and rotten. I sank against the wall, my legs giving out. What is that thing? I whispered, unable to keep the panic from my voice. It's not one thing, she whispered, leaning against the hatch, still listening. It's all of them. The silenced. They sense when we break the silence. They don't just hunt us. They become us. I don't understand, I said, clutching my head. This protocol. Why would we do this? Why would Earth... Survival, she interrupted. We were too loud, too curious, broadcasting our presence to the galaxy, reaching out to anything that would listen. We thought we were alone, but we were wrong. We weren't hearing the universe. We were being heard. She knelt beside me, her pale face twisted with a hollow, desperate look. At first, they answered back. Whispers in the static, patterns in the noise. But then they stopped. Or they changed. Those who tried to decode them, who tried to listen, they vanished. Or they became something else. Something else? She nodded. The silenced. The ones who broke the protocol. Those who listened too closely, who reached out and were reached back. Earth's final decision wasn't to stop listening. It was to force the galaxy to ignore us. We broadcast a warning, a threat. Stay silent. Do not acknowledge. But they didn't stop, I whispered. The stars didn't go silent. We did. Her eyes darkened. We jammed ourselves, masked our world, forced silence. But those who heard, those who reached out anyway, they're marked. And when the protocol fails... The pounding below grew faint, distant, but never entirely gone. I swallowed hard. What do they want? If they've already become... those things. They want the rest of us, she whispered, to drag us into their silence, to make us part of them. Her flashlight flickered again and she slapped it, panic flashing in her eyes. Damn it! Damn it! No! A faint hum pressed against my ears, a low, rhythmic pulse. My heart raced as I recognized it. The same hum from my radio, from the static. But now it was everywhere, a low throb pressing against my thoughts. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Don't listen," she snapped, gripping my arm. "They're trying to reach us." But the hum grew louder, and beneath it, I could hear something else. Faint, distorted whispers, broken words clawing at the edges of my thoughts. Closer. Marked. Join us. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the whispers only grew sharper, twisting, clawing, like 1,000 voices layered over each other. The room seemed to pulse, the shadows thickening. The woman's flashlight flared, then died. We were plunged into darkness. I felt her hands gripping me, her panicked breathing mixing with my own. "Hold on," she gasped. "Don't listen. Don't think about them. They feed on it, on our fear, our thoughts. They become us when we listen." I tried. I really did. I forced myself to think of anything else, of the sky, of my old apartment, of quiet, safe places. But the whispers were everywhere, clawing at me, and with them came the cold. A deep, bone-chilling cold that sank into my skin, into my thoughts. A voice rose above the others, clearer, closer. "You are here. You hear. You are one of us." "No," I screamed, clutching my head. "No, I won't." A hand clamped over my mouth. The woman's voice hissed in my ear. "Don't speak. Don't acknowledge. Please, please don't." But the darkness rippled and I saw them, faces forming in the gloom. Pale, empty eyes staring from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The mist twisted around us, forming hands, clawing shapes. The woman dragged me, pulling me along the wall. I felt the cold touch of the mist brushing my arm, leaving a burning, numb sensation. The whispers grew louder, frantic. "Listen. Hear. Become." I forced myself to stay silent, to bite my tongue until I tasted blood. The woman reached a rusted metal grate and pried at it. It groaned, barely moving. I grabbed it, our combined strength pulling it free just enough to crawl through. She shoved me in first. I scrambled through the narrow, jagged tunnel, the metal scraping against my arms and legs. The hum behind us grew to a roar, and her voice was frantic. "Keep going. Don't stop. Don't listen." I crawled faster, the darkness around me alive with twisting shadows. The mist was seeping through the gaps, clawing at my legs, but I didn't look back. Her frantic breathing was right behind me. Then she screamed, a sharp, desperate cry that cut off too quickly. "No!" I reached back, but something slammed into me, forcing me forward. I tumbled out of the tunnel, crashing into another dark corridor. The grate slammed shut behind me, twisted, warped, sealed. Her screams were muffled now, buried beneath the hum, a faint, broken echo. "Please," I screamed, pounding against the metal. "Please, no. You have to." The metal was cold, burning against my hands. The mist curled around it, fading, and then silence. Only darkness stretched before me, the faint rhythmic hum pressing against my thoughts, but no more screams, no more whispers. I was alone. I stumbled back, my chest heaving, the silence pressing against me like a weight. But even in that darkness, I knew the truth. I hadn't escaped. I had just been left behind. The darkness swallowed me, thick and suffocating. I crouched in the narrow corridor, the cold metal of the sealed grate pressing against my back. My mind reeled, replaying her screams, the brief, frantic struggle, and then nothing. A suffocating emptiness. I whispered her name, realized I didn't even know it. She'd saved me, dragged me away from the shadows, and now she was gone. Consumed. Silenced. The hum was still there, a low, throbbing pulse pressing against my skull. But now it was softer, distant, like a muffled heartbeat buried in the walls. I forced myself to breathe, to focus. Panic wouldn't help me, But the silence wasn't just around me. It was inside me, a gnawing emptiness, a cold certainty that I was alone. I turned, feeling my way along the narrow passage. The air was thick, damp, smelling of rust and decay. My fingers brushed against slick, cold metal, a leaking pipe, then another. I moved forward, inch by inch, every sound amplified in the darkness. My own breathing, the faint drip of water, the creak of strained metal. But then I heard something else. A faint, rhythmic tapping. I froze, my heart racing. The sound was above me, a slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. I forced myself to move, staying low, following the curve of the passage. It twisted, narrowed, then opened into a larger chamber. A weak, sickly light filtered from above, an old maintenance light, flickering, swaying from a thin wire. The room was a tangle of rusted machinery, thick cables hanging like tangled vines. Pools of dark water dotted the cracked floor, reflecting the flickering light. And across the room, leaning against a rusted control panel, was another figure. I ducked behind a twisted metal beam, barely breathing. But the figure didn't move, not like the others. It stood still, slumped, its head bowed. A faint dark mist clung to it, but it didn't shift, didn't turn. A voice whispered, faint and broken, "Please, please." I peered around the edge of the beam, fear clawing at me. The figure was human, or it had been. A man, his clothes soaked, his hair matted. His face was twisted in anguish, his lips moving, but the sound was a faint static whisper like a broken signal. But then his head jerked, twitching, his hollow eyes snapping up. I ducked, my heart pounding. Silence. The light flickered, casting twisted shadows. I waited, counted the seconds, forced myself to breathe. But there was nothing. No movement, no sound. I peeked again, and the figure was gone. Only the thin mist remained, curling slowly across the room. I had to move. I didn't know where I was going, but staying here felt like a slow death. I slipped along the wall, avoiding the puddles, trying to stay quiet. But the hum seemed to grow, the pressure building in the air. My thoughts were a tangled blur. Her words, the whispers, the protocol. We had forced the silence, cut ourselves off to avoid them. But it hadn't worked. They were here. They had always been here, listening, waiting. A low, static-filled whisper crawled through the air. "Please, hear me." I spun around. The mist was thickening, crawling across the walls, the ceiling, coiling like grasping fingers. I backed away, my foot slipping on the wet floor. I stumbled, catching myself on a cold metal beam, but my touch seemed to stir something. The mist pulsed, thickening, a dark shape forming in its center. A face pushed through the mist, twisted, gaunt, a mouth wide in a silent scream. Another face appeared, then another, each one struggling, clawing, trying to break free but merging, melting into the darkness. I ran. I didn't care where. I ducked under hanging cables, scrambled over twisted machinery, the hum rising to a roar. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows stretching, grasping. Ahead, a narrow doorway appeared, a rusted metal hatch, barely hanging on its hinges. I crashed into it, wrenching it open, and fell through. I tumbled down a sloping metal grate, landing in another narrow corridor. My head throbbed, but I scrambled to my feet, shoving the hatch shut behind me. The hum was muffled again, but not gone. I pushed forward, the corridor tilting downward, twisting. The darkness was alive, shapes shifting at the edges of my vision. But I didn't dare look, didn't dare listen. Her voice haunted me. They feed on it, on our fear, our thoughts. They become us when we listen. I reached another metal door, this one slightly ajar. Faint light spilled through and I shoved it open, stumbling into another room. But this one was different. An old security office. Dust-covered monitors lined the walls, most cracked, but one still flickered with static. A worn-out chair sat in the center, a microphone hanging limply over a cluttered control panel. I hesitated, then approached. The static on the screen pulsed, and beneath it I saw a shape. A figure standing in a dark corridor. My corridor. It wasn't moving, but its head was tilted, listening. My heart raced. I grabbed the microphone, my hands shaking, and yanked it free. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I needed to stop them, to silence them. But as I tore the microphone from the panel, a faint whisper crackled through the speakers. "Don't. Please. Hear me." It was her voice. The woman who had saved me. Her voice, twisted, broken, buried beneath the static. "No," I whispered, gripping the edge of the panel. "No. You can't." The static thickened, the screen pulsing, and I saw them. Faces, twisted in anguish, pressing against the screen, their mouths moving, silent screams lost in the noise. My phone buzzed again, vibrating in my pocket. I pulled it out, still dead, but the buzzing was constant now, a frantic pulse, and with it came the whispers, louder, overlapping, clawing at my thoughts. Listen. Hear. Become. The shadows in the room thickened, coiling, pressing in. I staggered back, the whispers drilling into my mind. I grabbed the microphone, staring at it. Her voice was still there, faint, desperate. "If you can hear me, please stop listening." Tears burned in my eyes. I smashed the microphone against the control panel again and again, sparks bursting, the static flaring. The shadows recoiled, then surged, twisting around me. I screamed, swinging the broken metal, but the darkness twisted, curling around my arms, my chest, my throat. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the screen. Her face, twisted in the static, her mouth moving, but I couldn't hear her. Silence swallowed me. Darkness pressed in, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't sure if I was awake, dreaming, or something far worse. The silence around me was absolute. No hum, no whispers, no flicker of static. Just a void. I tried to move, but my arms felt numb, my legs sluggish, as if they weren't mine. Panic clawed at me, but even my own thoughts felt distant, muffled. But then a flicker, light, faint, bleeding through the darkness. I reached for it, desperate, and suddenly I was standing. The darkness peeled away, and I found myself in a corridor, narrow and endless, its walls pulsing like a living thing. The air was thick, damp, and smelled of something sweet and rotten. A low, rhythmic thrum pulsed through the walls, a heartbeat I could feel in my bones. I tried to run, but the corridor twisted beneath me, shifting like a coiling serpent. "Don't listen. Don't respond." Her voice, faint, distorted. But it was her, the woman who saved me, who pulled me from the mist. I tried to follow the sound, but the corridor stretched, the walls bending, faces pressing out from the darkness. Pale, twisted faces, their mouths moving in silent screams. "No," I whispered, backing away. "No, you're not. You can't." But they surged forward, the walls rippling, their hands clawing at me. I turned, running, but the ground tilted beneath me. I fell, tumbling through the dark, the faces swirling around me, whispering, begging. And then I hit the ground. Pain lanced through me. Real, sharp. I gasped, my vision blurring. I wasn't in the corridor anymore. I was back in the security room. The monitors were shattered, the control panel sparking, the room drenched in shadows. My hands were scraped, bleeding, but I was alive. The door I had come through hung open, the faint, pulsing hum leaking in from beyond. But it was different now. Faster, frantic, like a heartbeat. I stood, my legs shaking, but I forced myself forward. The corridor outside was twisted, the walls smeared with a thick, dark substance. The lights flickered, casting frantic, broken shadows. I had to get out, had to get away from whatever this was. But as I stumbled forward, I saw them, more figures, pale and motionless, standing in the darkness. They didn't turn, didn't move, but the mist twisted around them, curling and silent, grasping shapes. I kept close to the wall, moving quietly, but the hum grew louder. The faces in the mist twitched, their hollow eyes flickering. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, trying to keep my breathing silent. But then one of them moved. A slow, deliberate turn. Its head twisted toward me, the mist curling tighter around it, and then its mouth opened, a thin, static whisper crawling out. Join. Become. Silence. I ran. No plan, no direction. Just a desperate, frantic need to escape. The corridor twisted, branching, but each path seemed to narrow, the walls pulsing, pressing closer. Shadows slithered at the edges of my vision, whispering, clawing. My phone buzzed again, a constant, frantic pulse in my pocket. I pulled it out, but the screen was still dead, its empty glow casting a faint, sickly light. But through the broken glass, I saw something. Words, faint, burned into the screen. Listen. End the signal. End the signal. But how? My thoughts raced, fragments of the woman's warnings, the whispers, the static. The protocol. Forced silence. But it hadn't worked, because something was still broadcasting. They were drawn to the signal, hungry for it. The same hum, the same pulse that clawed at my thoughts. But if I could stop it, if I could shut it down, maybe they would. Maybe they would be forced back. I stumbled forward, following the faint hum, the pulse growing louder. It wasn't just in the air now. It was in the walls, the floor, twisting around me. Faces pressed through the darkness, their mouths moving, but their words were faint, muffled. I reached a stairwell, the rusted metal steps spiraling downward. The hum was louder here, a throbbing pulse pressing against my skull. I grabbed the railing, stumbling down, the shadows twisting around me, reaching. But as I descended, I saw it. A faint, pulsing light below, bleeding through a half-open door. The hum was like a roar now, a deafening, crushing sound that tore at my thoughts. I crashed through the door and found myself in a massive chamber. Machinery lined the walls, thick cables twisting like veins. At the center, a massive glass cylinder pulsed with a sickly, greenish light, its surface swirling with shadows. Faces pressed against the glass, their mouths moving in silent screams. And at the base of the cylinder, a control panel flickered, its screens a chaotic blur of static. A single word pulsed on the screen. Receiving. I staggered forward, my thoughts twisting, the whispers clawing at my mind. The faces in the glass twisted, stretching, clawing, trying to break free. End the signal. I had to end it. My hands flew over the control panel, but the screens flashed with error messages. The static grew louder, the hum pressing against me, the darkness twisting, clawing. Become. Silence. Here. No, I screamed, slamming my fists against the panel. I won't listen. I won't. But the glass pulsed, a crack splintering across its surface. The faces pressed harder, their mouths stretching, the mist curling out, clawing toward me. I grabbed the nearest lever, yanking it down. Sparks erupted. The hum spiked to a deafening shriek. The shadows surged, clawing at my arms, my chest, my throat. But the cylinder pulsed, the cracks spreading, the faces twisting in agony. The hum fractured, the static breaking into 1,000 desperate, clawing voices. I grabbed another switch, slamming it. The lights flared, the machinery groaned. The mist recoiled, twisting violently, but the whispers grew frantic, desperate. Don't listen. Don't leave us. I grabbed a final switch, the largest, marked Manual Override. I didn't know what it would do. I didn't care. I pulled. A blinding light erupted, the cylinder shattering, the faces twisting, melting, the mist boiling. The roar became a shriek, the darkness clawing at me, pulling me down. But as the light flared, everything fractured. The whispers tore apart, the shadows shuddered, and then silence. Not the suffocating, crushing silence from before, just quiet. I stood, gasping, my vision clearing. The chamber was dark now. The machinery twisted, silent. The glass cylinder lay in shattered fragments, its twisted faces faded, gone. But I wasn't alone. A figure stood at the far end of the room, barely visible in the dim light. Pale, hollow-eyed, but familiar. The woman. Her face was empty, twisted in sorrow. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. She raised a hand, reaching for me, but then her form shimmered, twisted, and dissolved into mist. I was alone again, but the hum was gone. The whispers. Gone. I'd stopped the signal, but I didn't know if I'd escaped, or if I was now just another voice in the silence. The silence was unbearable. It hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating, pressing in from every direction. I couldn't tell if the darkness around me was a result of the shattered machinery or something deeper, more sinister. The room felt wrong, too still, too empty. It was like the universe had paused, holding its breath. But I knew better than to trust the quiet. Silence was never peace. It was just a temporary lull before the storm, a momentary gap between the whispers, the hum, the chaos. I stood in the ruined chamber, my hands shaking as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. The shadows seemed to flicker, distorting at the edges of my vision. The mist, once thick and suffocating, had receded, but there was something else in the air now, something heavier. I turned, feeling the weight of the empty room pressing down on me. The door I had entered through was still ajar, its rusted hinges creaking softly in the stillness. I felt an unnatural pull, an instinct telling me to leave, to get out before the silence consumed me. But every step I took felt like it might be my last. As I approached the door, I saw the faintest flicker of movement in the shadows beyond it. A shape, shifting, slow, deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, barely breathing, my eyes straining in the dark. The shape moved again, closer this time, and I realized with a sickening jolt that it wasn't human. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. The shape was tall, shifting like liquid, its form constantly warping, breaking apart and reassembling in a grotesque dance. It was like it was made of shadows, but the shadows were alive, swirling around it, writhing in the empty space. I couldn't move. My body was locked in place, rooted to the spot by an overwhelming sense of dread. It was as if the very air had turned against me. And then it spoke, not with words, but with a presence, a pressure against my mind, a push that I could feel deep in my bones. A voice without sound, yet its meaning was as clear as if it had been shouted into my ear. "You shouldn't have listened." The words weren't spoken aloud, but inside my skull, reverberating, echoing like a deep growl in the distance. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. The air around me was thick, smothering. The figure's form shimmered again, and then it stretched, expanding, as though it was growing in size, filling the room with an oppressive weight. It reached toward me, its long, tendril-like limbs dragging across the floor with an eerie, wet sound. The darkness around me seemed to pulse in time with its movements, feeding off its very existence. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were closing in. The floor beneath me seemed to sink, to tilt, as if the room itself was twisting. The whispers returned, louder this time, louder than ever before. The static of broken voices, of desperate souls, clamoring in the space around me. The faces from the glass cylinder were back, pressing through the walls, their eyes hollow and empty, their mouths stretched wide in eternal screams that were lost in the oppressive silence. "Please." I heard her voice again, distorted, broken, but unmistakably hers. She had warned me. She had begged me to stop. I could still hear her, even through the crushing weight of the shadows. But there was no time. The figure's tendrils reached closer, and I could feel the cold of them, like ice, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me in. It was stronger than anything I'd ever felt, its presence suffocating, drowning out my thoughts. Every fiber of my being screamed to fight, to run, but I couldn't. I was trapped, and then I felt it. A strange sensation, something that I couldn't quite comprehend. A pressure building in my chest, in my mind. The static on the walls grew louder, the whispers turning into shrieks. The tendrils coiled tighter around me, squeezing. The room spun, the walls bending, warping, as though the very space was breaking apart. You have no choice. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. The figure's presence was all-consuming, its grip tightening, pulling me closer to it, to the heart of the darkness. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, merging, a cacophony of tortured souls. But through the noise, I heard something else. Something terrifying. The hum. It was back. Faint at first, barely perceptible but growing steadily. The signal that had once called them here. The signal that had brought me to this point. It was alive again, pulsing in the air like a heartbeat, a rhythm I couldn't escape. It was feeding them, and I was feeding the signal. You are the signal. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just a victim of this place, this nightmare. I was part of it. The whispers, the hum, the darkness, it had all been leading to this. I was the catalyst. My presence, my fear, my confusion, it had all fueled this endless cycle. The figure's tendrils coiled tighter, the darkness around me consuming every inch of space. The room began to collapse, the walls closing in, the floor warping. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as the weight of the signal crushed me. But then, a flash of light, a sudden blinding burst like a shockwave tearing through my mind. The darkness trembled, recoiling, and the figure screamed, a horrible guttural sound that rattled my bones. And then it stopped. I gasped for air, my vision blurry. The figure was gone, the shadows receding, the oppressive weight lifting. For a moment there was nothing but silence, the kind of silence that comes after a storm. A quiet, heavy silence, as though the world was holding its breath, waiting. I stumbled to my feet, dizzy, disoriented, but alive. The room was empty now, its twisted machinery silent. The walls were intact. The hum was gone. But the air felt wrong. It felt like something had changed. Like the silence wasn't a victory, but a warning. And I realized with a sinking feeling in my chest that this was far from over. The hum would return. The signal would rise again. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Not here, not anywhere. And neither was she. The air was thick, saturated with a strange, suffocating pressure that pressed against my chest like a hand made of darkness. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the very ground beneath me was soaked in the weight of what had happened. The silence that followed the chaos wasn't comforting. It was a pause, a brief respite before the inevitable. I could feel it, deep inside my bones, a pull that I couldn't ignore. Something was coming. I stumbled through the corridors, my breath ragged, my legs unsteady. The room I had just fled from seemed so distant now, but the darkness hadn't lifted. It was still here, lingering like an oppressive fog, watching, waiting. The walls were no longer solid. They were shifting, warping in ways I couldn't comprehend. Faces pressed against the surfaces, not just the ones I had seen before, but new ones, twisted, contorted in agony, silently screaming with their eyes. The whispers returned, faint at first, but then louder, louder and unmistakable. "She's coming. You can't stop it. You can't run." The voice was familiar, but it wasn't hers. It was something darker, something older, a whisper that scraped against my mind, itching at the edges of my sanity. I snapped my head around, trying to find the source, but the hallways were empty. The only movement was the undulating shadows, stretching and recoiling as though they had a mind of their own. I broke into a run, desperate to escape, but I couldn't outrun the feeling that had settled deep inside me, that feeling of inevitability. The walls were closing in. The floor beneath me buckled. I stumbled, catching myself against the peeling walls, but they were no longer walls. They were alive. The texture was soft, like skin, pulsating under my hands as I pushed against it. The hallway twisted, buckled, as if the entire structure was folding in on itself. "She's coming. For you." I turned down another hallway, my heart pounding in my chest, each footstep echoing in the suffocating silence. But there was no escape. The space ahead of me had begun to collapse, pulling in on itself, a black hole of writhing shadows. The faces in the walls were watching, but they weren't the ones who terrified me. No, it was what was coming, what was waiting at the end of the corridor. I could hear it now, growing louder with each breath, each step I took. It was the hum, the signal. But it wasn't the same as before. This time it was warped, twisted. I could feel it crawling under my skin, inside my skull, rattling my teeth with its frequency. It was different this time. It was louder, closer, more insistent. I reached a door, its surface scratched and battered as though something had been clawing at it from the other side. I didn't hesitate. I ripped it open, heart in my throat. Beyond the door was another space. Not a room. It was a chamber. And inside the chamber, suspended in the center, was a giant screen. Its surface flickered with static, but this static was alive. It pulsed in time with the hum, each flicker of light flashing an image, a scene, a fragment of reality that wasn't mine. Faces appeared, only to disappear, twisted and contorted in agony. But then, there she was. Her face appeared on the screen, her expression no longer distorted, but clear, haunting. It was the woman, the one who had tried to warn me, the one whose voice had echoed in my mind. She was standing in a place that was not here, a place beyond this twisted reality, her eyes wide with terror. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. "Don't listen. Don't." Her words were lost to static, but I understood. She was trying to tell me something important. I moved closer to the screen, but the closer I got, the more distorted her image became. The static intensified, the hum shaking the walls. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt a strange connection, a shared understanding that chilled me to the bone. And then the hum stopped, a deafening silence, and then a voice. Not from the screen, not from anywhere I could see. It came from within, deep inside me, as though it had always been there, waiting to surface. "You have triggered the signal. You are the signal." The words weren't clear, but I felt them, deep in my core, vibrating in my chest, in my mind. The screen flickered one last time, and for a brief moment I saw something that made my blood run cold. A reflection, not of myself, but of something behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. The screen exploded in a burst of static, sending sparks flying through the room. The hum returned, but it was different this time. Chaotic, violent, as if the entire place was shaking, unraveling. I ran, but the floor gave way beneath me, and I fell into the darkness. I didn't know how long I was falling. It felt like hours, days, lifetimes. The blackness swallowed me whole, and the last thing I heard before I hit the ground was the voice again, that terrible, all-encompassing voice. "You were always meant to be part of the signal. The silence is nothing. The signal is everything." And then everything went dark.